All right, we are 4:40 p.m. on Wednesday. We are 4:40 p.m. on Wednesday. Yes, that's right. Today was my garbage pickup day, and I believe that I am the only one on my street who got the message about no blue bin pickup. So again, I will remind people that we are suspending blue bin pickup. Store your recyclables. Okay, I just told you a falsehood. My house guests, who are really, really sweet people, actually very early this morning took out my waste and recycling to the curb, and they took my blue bin out. So clearly the message is not getting through, so let's try that again. We are suspending blue bin pickup. Please store your recyclables or take them to the community recycling depot. This will be a short briefing today. We're just continuing to work away at things. I have a few updates for you. For the first time since we have started our discussions with these briefings, I can tell you that the flow rates of the water are unchanged since our previous briefing. The Elbow River below the Glenmore Dam is still at 60 cubic meters per second, normal for this time of year. The Bow below the Bears Paw Dam is 650 cubic meters per second, which is still very, very high. And the confluence, the Alderman Carron number, is 700 cubic meters per second, which is again 3 times what it would be at normal, but unchanged from our earlier briefing. Safety. Again, the usual diesel and gasoline powered things don't belong in your house. I don't want anyone to have more carbon monoxide poisoning. Stay away from the riverbanks. Follow Alberta Health Services information on calgary.ca for those of you doing cleanup. Things about like asbestos and mold and how to manage all of that. I want to say that I know a lot of people who haven't been cleared yet to return to multifamily homes are finding this very frustrating. And I know it's frustrating. I know it's really tough. But safety is still first. We're still in a state of emergency, and we don't want anyone going back if in case their safety is compromised. So please, I know you've been so patient for so long, 6 days, but just wait a little while longer. Your patience now will pay huge dividends in allowing us to be able to get everyone home and back to work safely. All right, operational update. Langevin Bridge, Edmonton Trail, now open. So we're doing very, very, very well on reopening our bridges. The folks who put window signs saying pumping needed, we've actually been able to help 95% of those people. So 95% of requests for residential pumping have been completed. And as a reminder, we're not using the window placard system anymore. I know it was super high tech, but we've now moved to a system where you just go to your local community support center in your neighborhood. There are 9 of them, I think, and they will be able to set you up, and the people you need will be right there. And I want to say as well, we've been helping with pumping at the city, using all the resources we have, but a very, very, very large number of private or individuals and organizations have been helping. I've been hearing stories about people coming from Saskatchewan, coming from other parts of Alberta, driving these pump trucks and just coming and helping. And I know a number of local businesses, one that comes to mind is Action Auger, have been doing this for free throughout these neighborhoods. You know, that's pretty impressive. This is these people's business. This is actually how they make money. And the fact that they are coming in and doing this work for their neighbors for free is yet another testament to the spirit of Calgary. So thank you about that. I want to talk to you about something none of us want to talk about, parking. We've done a survey of the downtown, and only 55% of downtown parking stalls are available. That includes surface parking and parkades, both public and private. We've got to manage our parking situation a little bit better. You have to start paying for parking again. So starting tomorrow morning, the Calgary Parking Authority will implement normal on-street payment for parking. It's not because they want your money, it's because we have to manage the situation where there are cars that are downtown all day, and we need to have access still for emergency vehicles and for building owners. So we are going to start charging for parking tomorrow. I'll say more about downtown in a moment. I will say that a small number of residences still have individual sanitary sewer issues. There's no system-wide issues, but if you're having backup in your sanitary sewer, just like any other day, not in a crisis, please call 311 and we will look after you. I want to talk about NMAX for a minute. The quote I have here is that NMAX are busting butts to make this happen. It is not clear if they are busting their own butts or other people's butts. I'm not sure about that. Total number of customers without power is 10,151, of which 9,131 underground customers. That means downtown, Beltline, Mission, Connaught, Victoria Park, Cliff Bungalow. Only under 1,000 customers outside of the downtown are still without power. So what that means, by the way, if you're in a neighborhood where power has been restored, but you don't individually have power, you need to contact 311. Either call 311, go to cityofcalgary.ca, I should say, use the 311 mobile app, or go to your community service center in your neighborhood, tell them what's going on, and we'll figure out what the situation is with your house. Power has now been restored to the following neighborhoods: Ogden, Bonnybrook, Rideau, Roxborough, and Stanley Park. Still working on Elbow Park, Earlton, and Riverdale. Work absolutely still continues as a top priority in the Beltline communities, Connaught and Victoria Park, as well as Cliff Bungalow and Mission. Maximum resources have been deployed to these communities. These repairs are very, very complex. We're still hoping for tonight. We're still hoping we'll be able to re-energize these neighborhoods for tonight. You'll see some of these folks working exactly there on their work. So we're hoping for tonight. I was hoping I'd be able to announce it around supper time. It might be an hour or two later, but we're still hoping for tonight. That doesn't mean that you can go home. What it means is that when the grid is energized, the individual property owners, the building owners, can go in, start doing an assessment, call us in, we'll complete the assessment, we'll flip the switch, and we'll have power on. So if the downtown is any indication, once the grid is re-energized, we can get to a situation where the power in the individual buildings is up within a matter of hours after that. I was happy when the chief announced this morning, and I'll reiterate this announcement, that we did actually energize and open up the first two very large residential buildings in the Beltline overnight. They happen to be on a slightly different grid system, but that's Keystone and New Era. Property taxes. As I announced this morning, we do have a waiver on late penalties for residential property taxes only if you pay your taxes between Friday and July the 12th. That said, your taxes really are due on Friday, and if you can pay them, pay them. May as well get that out of the way. There are over 98% of households who are unimpacted by the floods, and that's really who that message is for. And of course, there are many, many options to pay them. You can pay them at any bank, any ATM, by post, online, telephone banking, or at our 4 temporary customer service counters. I paid mine today at the Rosecon Arena on Heritage Drive. The Chief Financial Officer is sitting in the audience, and he just smiled when he heard that I paid mine today. He needed that money very badly, I think. At the elections office off of Deerfoot Trail on 11th Street Northeast, Forest Lawn on 17th Avenue Southeast, and the Georgina Thompson Library in the Northwest. And again, you can use cash. I want to know who pays their property tax in cash. No, I don't? Okay. No, we're the municipal government. We don't take business tax from anyway, never mind. Cash, checks, or debit. I can attest that the debit machine worked for me today. Didn't work for my chief of staff, though. I think because he lives in a multi-billion-dollar house, it just knocked out the debit system. I think I'm paying him too much. You cannot use credit cards, and you can sign up for the TIP program. All right, so on community cleanup, I've got a couple of new things for you. Since we've done a great job on residential pumping, we're turning our attention using city resources, having finished the 95% of houses that need it, to small businesses. It's time for us to get to those mom and pop stores in different operations within the communities. So if you're a small business and you can't make your own arrangements for pumping, come to your community support center in your neighborhood, or call 311, but use the online 311 service request or the app, and we'll get out and help you as soon as we can. We already talked about keeping the streets clear, very, very important. Limit local on-street parking. We need to ensure access for vehicles like ambulances and fire trucks, waste collection vehicles and pumper trucks. The community service centers have safety equipment available, respiratory masks, gloves, and safety glasses. Use them, please, especially the masks. If you're pulling out drywall and insulation in a basement, whether it's your own or someone you don't even knows, it would be helpful for you to have that. If you have hazardous waste, anything that you wouldn't normally throw in the landfill, you can see calgary.ca for a list of that. You can still leave it on your lawn. Just make a separate pile, please, and label it hazardous waste. And we have been starting courtesy towing. We haven't had to do it very much. I think people have been very disciplined. I will remind volunteers, you're amazing. You're heroes. You're fantastic. Thank you. The number of people who are going into these communities and just going door to door and helping strangers, it knocks me to my knees every time. But I will ask you to be respectful of the work that's being done and the neighborhood. So if you can, please park on the outskirts of the neighborhood. If you're going to Rideau, park in the Safeway parking lot at Mission. I'm sure Safeway would love me telling you that. And walk in. That way we can keep the roads as clear as possible. And that's still a very big problem in the neighborhoods that I was in today. And residential parking permit zones continue to be relaxed. Hot off the presses. Midnight. Beltline will be midnight. They were aiming for 7 and then it was 10. It looks like they're aiming for midnight, but that's better than tomorrow. So let's see if we get there. Downtown, building access, road access, improving minute by minute. We're improving hour by hour. We're not back to normal. It still makes sense for employers to let people work from home the rest of the week wherever possible and get back to a sense of normalcy after Canada Day on Tuesday. Canada Day is the day when all Calgarians are invited back to enjoy their downtown. And we've got to just do a better job on gridlock. I have to tell you, however, that there are people who have to go downtown. The province of Alberta has asked us to let you know that the Calgary Provincial Court, Criminal and Traffic Divisions will return to full business as usual commencing tomorrow. So, that little holiday is over. If you have a matter scheduled in either of these courts for that day or any day after, you are expected, that's the language they use, you are expected to attend as directed. Well, the provincial government is much more directive and bossy than the city government, aren't they? It's because it's the court. You have to go. So, once again, if you are thinking of going downtown, walk, bike, take transit. Walk, bike, take transit. Walk, bike, take transit. I did have the chance to walk on Memorial, I did walk, but also to see Memorial McLeod Trail today. That is incredible, that road that got built in one day. The other interesting thing about it is I'll remind people that the right-hand lane is a transit-only lane. It's transit-only lane down the length of McLeod Trail to Heritage Run, all the way to Heritage, and I'm told that it worked really well today. And our colleagues at Calgary Transit were able to get people in and out of downtown very, very speedily. So please respect that right-hand lane. Folks, I've talked a lot about my colleagues at the City of Calgary. There's 20,000 of us in a given year that get to wake up every single morning and serve our fellow citizens, and every single one of them is a great hero. You know who I haven't talked about much lately is our contractors, who do incredible work. Every day, our partners in the private sector do great work for citizens, and I want to particularly say thank you to some of our construction contractors today, because they've done incredible things. I'm sure I'm going to forget a whole bunch of them, but Whistle pumped out those big tunnels. They just called and said, we got a giant pumper, what do you need? That's why C-Train service is going to come back so fast. The guys who helped build our roads, Volker Steven, Elsa, Standard General, amazing. Every one of you. Every one of you amazing, every one of you dedicated. Thank you so much for what you do on all of that. Excuse me. So, I have some more shots of McLeod Trail. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like now. That's incredible. Some more shots of the cleanup. This looks like the neighborhood of Earlton. You can see that this sort of thing is happening everywhere. But look at that. I hope the happy face isn't getting thrown out. And some good news today. I got to visit the zoo today and say thank you to the folks who have been working so hard in the zoo, who never in their lives thought that this is what they were doing. The giraffe on the left is Carrie. Yesterday I asked people to send all their love to Carrie. Those giraffes were up to their bellies in frigid water. They were very scared, they were very skittish, and Carrie, the one on the left, the female, wasn't eating afterwards. She was so stressed out. And I'm happy to report Carrie is doing a lot better. Please give Carrie your best wishes, and we'll get those giraffes back again. And by the way, the penguins didn't mind at all. They don't have issues with cold water. And they are happily frolicking around, though I must tell you, much of the zoo smells like their dinner. So they probably like that a lot. I heard a beautiful quotation today. I'm going to share it with you. A woman who used to work for the city of Calgary, as a matter of fact, was talking to relatives who were looking to come for the Stampede, who were wondering if they should cancel their trip. She said, absolutely not. And she said, you know what? You may not see Calgary at its prettiest, but you're going to see Calgary at its best. Questions?
What kind of aid are you expecting out of the federal and provincial government?
Did I miss something? Oh, I missed something. I will answer your question, and then I'll go back to the... Don't let me forget to tell you about the drop-in center.
So the question was, what aid are we expecting from the provincial and federal governments?
So as you know, I have a very scientific assessment of the total cost of the damage, which has changed a little bit since yesterday. I've gotten a little more precision. The cost of the damage is now lots and lots and lots. And I would imagine that, judging from the commitments we've heard from the province will be covering lots and lots and lots. And the federal government, through their legislation, will be cost sharing in lots and lots and lots. So that's my goal, and certainly we've heard good commitments from all of them. And certainly they've really moved out of their way to be helpful. And in fact, that reminds me of one thing I did want to mention today. It's actually three more things I want to mention. Wow, this briefing is longer than I thought it was. I had a chance to speak with Minister Kenney today, and I told him about my concern with hourly paid employees who are losing wages. And certainly we've reached out to employers and asked them to be generous with those employees. Minister Kenney reminded me that if you lose 5 days of wages, even if you're going back to the same job, if you lose 5 days of wages, you are eligible for employment insurance. And they've really tried hard to streamline the system for EI. You won't need an ROE, a record of employment, in order to apply. So if you've lost 5 days of wages, please apply for EI. It's not going to be everything, but it'll certainly help you. And that was very generous of Minister Kenney. Before I go to any other questions, I got two more quick things. One is the Calgary Drop-In and Rehabilitation Center is the first downtown shelter facility to be cleared and safe. Water and sewer services are operational. It's been cleaned. It's passed all inspections. Gas has been restored. They don't have electricity yet, but electricity will be supplied by generators. That means that the area around the center is still without power. Streetlights will not be lit. Signals are not working. Nearby buildings will remain dark, but those vulnerable citizens will be able to go back to the drop-in center. Something I had forgotten to do for several briefings in a row, and it's just reminded me, and I must do it. We thank contractors, we thank city staff, we thanked a whole bunch of volunteers. There is one group of volunteers I have not yet thanked, and that's my bad. I should have done it right at the beginning. Calgary Search and Rescue. Those folks are volunteers and they deploy immediately with first responders. They're incredibly brave, they do incredibly important work, and I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledged that incredibly important work today. Other questions? Kelly?
My colleagues in Ottawa have been looking into federal infrastructure funding over the last few years and what Calgary has got in that regard. Now there was, I think, over $600 million provided there. It could have been used for flood planning. Do you wish you would use more of that money for flood planning or flood preparation?
So the question is, does the city of Calgary wish that it had used some of its $700 million that was received in federal infrastructure funding for flood planning?
So as you know, the City of Calgary has about $23 billion with a B in unfunded capital needs. And while we are incredibly appreciative of the federal government's commitment to infrastructure funding, most recently in Budget 2013, all we can ever fund is a small portion of what needs to be done. So for example, in the economic stimulus program, those signs you see everywhere, Canada's Economic Action Plan, much of that we used for upgrades to the transit system, for example. And these are priorities that we make every single day and that we continue to make every single day. I will say that, as I mentioned before, some of the quiet work of your municipal government that we never ever talk about is quietly working away on things that we can afford when we can afford them, that we really wish other orders of government would fully fund. And one of those really is flood prevention, which has never seemed to be a hugely sexy thing, particularly among the other orders of government. But we have been working quietly away on it, beavering away on a plan. And in fact, as I mentioned before, I think one of the reasons that we avoided damage so much in the community of Inglewood at the confluence of the river is precisely because we've been berming in that area, and we continue to do work like that. And so hindsight is 20/20, but we have so many unfunded capital needs that we have to prioritize and make decisions, and I'm happy that we made that decision in Inglewood.
Do you think more will have to go towards flood preparation in the future, given?
It's a little early to say. There's some new science out around different kinds of floodplains. In fact, it's actually I probably am over dramatizing the story because I just love the way this sounds. But we've got a young woman who has been working for some time in the city on these floodplain maps. Really quite brilliant work, really brilliant work. And I'm just imagining. I'm sure it didn't really happen this way, but I'm just imagining her coming when we declared the state of emergency and throwing her maps on the table and saying, we got to evacuate these areas. And people saying, that's 100,000 people. And she's saying, we got to evacuate these areas. But you know what? Her floodplain mapping was almost entirely accurate. When we look at what actually happened, it was within millimeters of accuracy on her maps. And that's dedicated public service. And so as that science continues, we have to have a big think about how do we do that? Some people are saying, don't build in a floodplain. Well, the reason the city exists is because it is at the confluence of two rivers. That's why we're here. Because the Elbow and the Bow met, and the people who settled this city needed access to that water. So many of our oldest neighborhoods are the ones that we probably wouldn't have built in the 21st century if we were founding a brand new city. But it's the city we've got. So we manage the protection as well as we can. And certainly there may be other things to do, mechanical things to do, and so on. I think that's a question for another day.
And I was downtown this morning. It was pretty busy. There was a lot of people at work. Does it bother you that people aren't listening to the city's direction on that? They're saying, I got to get to work. I have a deadline.
Yeah, people have to make decisions for themselves on these things, on what's essential and so on. I will tell you that, when many of the large law firms insisted that their lawyers be at work, I had no idea lawyers were essential. And in particular, I've never met a corporate or commercial lawyer who, I took you out of the practice of the law so that you could do an essential job. Chiefs of staff, worse than politicians. My chief of staff used to be a lawyer. Now has an essential job. You were allowed to go downtown. And by the way, if you're wondering, does not ever write me any personal checks. But who knew that lawyers were essential, and in particular, who knew that lawyers weren't entirely mobile and couldn't work from home very, very easily. So these are the sorts of things that I would just remind people, if it's at all possible to work from home, so that the people who do have urgent deadlines, the people who do have to do the work, can actually get there without the gridlock.
Any idea for the
You're just
council,
dominating today.
How many homes have been affected by the flooding yet?
The question is, how many homes have been affected by the flooding yet?
Even in the ballpark?
My scientific ballpark figure is lots, but I'm wondering if...
A couple more on that, Your Worship.
I was going to say, do you have a bit more?
Lots and lots and lots.
Lots and lots? Lots and lots and lots. I want that number really badly as well, but because people are still cleaning up, because not everyone is checking in at those community service centers, a lot of people are just starting, it's really, really hard to get to it, but it's very much on a street-by-street basis. So, 4th Street in Rideau that I talked about this morning, I would suggest that every single house has had to have their basement stripped to the studs. And some of those houses are going to have structural issues. So every single house was affected, but probably 2 blocks in, not a single house was affected. So we'll work hard to get some more numbers, but I suspect it's going to be weeks before we got that number.
Is there any doubt it's in the thousands?
I'm sure it's in the thousands. No question. When we look at, and when I say it's in the thousands, some of those people have an inch of water in their basement. Some of those people will have to, radically rebuild. I understand, Chief. Do you know that some houses have been condemned? And I'm not sure what the implication of that is.
We have houses engineers are looking at currently
Okay.
that will likely be condemned.
Yeah, so I'll repeat that in the mic. We haven't condemned things, but we are looking at houses that engineers are looking at that may well be condemned. So the estimate of damage is very, very wide ranging. And in some of those older neighborhoods in the city, some homeowners are going to have some really tough decisions to make about whether their house is worth putting that kind of money into, particularly if they can't afford to build a new house. So there's going to be a lot of heartache debating that going forward. Anyone else?
Your worship, if it would help, I could briefly explain the assessment process.
Sure, why not?
Why we won't give a number.
Sure.
The assessment process that's used for determining property damage is done by assessment teams that go out while the area is still evacuated, so they don't actually go into the homes. For purposes of flooding, we use an area. If the water did not come up to your house, we just use a stoplight. So if you weren't impacted by water, we put a green dot on the map where your property is, saying that that property did not have any water come up to it. If you had roughly 3 feet of water or more come up into your property and your basement likely flooded, it's given a yellow. If you have significant water penetration and damage, we give it a red. So the reassessment is going on right now. When we get structures that will be uninhabitable and have to be fully remediated, which means bulldozed, it's fancy talk for whoops, we'll then put a black dot on the map. So we're still in the process of refining the yellows and the reds for the most part. The greens are pretty easy. Some of the yellows will shift up to greens, some of the yellows will shift down to reds, some of the reds may shift up to yellows, and we may in all likelihood end up with some blacks. So we'll have,
None yet.
well, not right at this moment. I do anticipate that if you were to ask the same question tomorrow morning, it may be slightly different.
Gary?
Well, your worship, now that you say that about the condemned homes, do you have some rough, general numbers? Are we talking dozens of homes?
We really
Hundreds of
don't know.
homes?
The question was if we have any rough general numbers of how many homes might be condemned. We really don't know. The answer today is 0, but as Chief Burrell says, there will be some. There will be some, and when we start to get some more numbers on that, we'll share those.
And, I mean, we're talking some of the most expensive homes in the city of Calgary, Rideau, Roxborough, East Elbow, Glencoe, Riverdale, millions and millions of dollars.
I mean, this is a very interesting situation, right? Because you're right. Some of the homes in the city are very expensive homes, but not all of them. You know, you go a block in the community of Rideau, and you, as I did on 4th Street, and you've got little 600 square foot, 100-year-old houses. So there's a wide variety of people who've been impacted at every part of the socioeconomic scale. And this will be interesting for the province, frankly, if I can be a pundit for just a second. As they're developing their disaster relief plans, they're going to have to think hard about that question. All right. Thank you, everyone. We will end it there. And I'm not sure if we'll have an evening briefing tonight. If I've got some significant power issues, we'll do so. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.